I'm going to be covering the J-10A first. Just to clear up some of the confusion on this plane, it did not have data link when this update first came out, and the footage I've gathered with this plane that you're going to be watching in this video, it does not have data link. However, as of the time of recording, it did receive data link. So when you guys get your hands on this plane, it will have data link. And why is that important? Well, data link helps guide the active radar homing missile to its target when you're tracking with TWS until it goes active and uses its own radar. So if you're wondering how I actually got kills with the PL-12s in this plane when this plane didn't have data link using TWS, well, you don't actually need data link to use active radar homing missiles. For the longest time, the F-14s didn't have it when they first came out with their Phoenixes, and of course, that didn't stop us all from using the AIM-54 and TWS just fine. It's still plenty capable, and honestly, I barely ever noticed any shots where I was really missing the data link capability. Only at really far ranges when my target was hugging the ground did I think, yeah, I probably would have gotten a kill right there if I was using like an AMRAAM with data link. It did end up coming to the game with 72 countermeasures, which definitely isn't the most by any means at this battle rating, but it is an acceptable amount. It's a usable amount, especially so now that we have some split flare and shaft. You can deploy whichever you want and mix it however way you want. I have yet to run out of countermeasures with this plane. The radar, the RWR, the HMD, all that is just fine. I do wish the HMD went to like 19-20 kilometers like you see on some of the NATO planes, and I think there's actually even a few Russian planes. I think the MiG-29 SMT now has 20-kilometer HMD as well. This is a big deal to me. I think that's extremely important to have, but it's not the end of the world if a plane doesn't have it. It's just the one thing that I really wish the J-10 had that it's missing. Having 6 active radar homing missiles and 2 IRCCM missiles is a great loadout at this battle rating. A lot of planes can only carry 4 and 2, like the Gripen and the F-16 variants. Some planes can carry 8 active radar homing missiles. It just depends. This one is a little bit above the average loadout, and I really don't have any complaints about it. The PL-5 does have IRCCM on the live build, even though it did not on the dev server, so it's cool to see what this thing's finally capable of. And it just feels like a PL-5B or a PL-5C rather with IRCCM. And its gate with IRCCM, allegedly it's the exact same as on the Magic 2 and the R-73. So really strong at close range rear aspect, much more flare hungry at further ranges. It'd be nice if it had tracking suspension instead, because I think the PL-5 is a bit more of a long range missile. And in long-range launches, it is very nice to have tracking suspension IRCCM rather than gate width like on the AIM-9M. But still, it is an upgrade over other Chinese IR missiles, so no complaints really. I just kind of would have preferred the tracking suspension for this particular missile. It accelerates really hard off the rail, just like all the other PL-5s do, but it does pull a little bit harder, at least according to the stat card. I didn't really ever notice the extra 5 Gs of pull. Maybe in really close ranges when you're doing dogfights and kind of throwing all of that lead into the missile and shooting that dart shot at close range with the PL-5, maybe that 5G would come in handy just to make you not have to lead quite as much, but still I just never really noticed it being any kind of benefit. The PL-12 feels pretty much like AMRAAM Junior to me. I've never really noticed a huge difference between the missiles except range. The AMRAAM will go further than the PL-12 pretty reliably and continue holding energy better once that motor burns out. Or maybe perhaps it's just because the AMRAAM burns longer or faster and that's why it carries more range. I'm not sure, but moral of the story is, in my experience, they feel very similar in terms of pull and capability, except for the fact that the AMRAAM does go further. I kind of view the PL-12 as pretty much a dead average active radar homing missile at this battle rating. There are a couple of missiles I'd like to have over PL-12s in certain situations, but it's not really bad at anything. And given the way that Foxway combat works, you don't have to have the absolute most range. Even if somebody shoots at you first, you can continue to push in towards them, get yourself within range, shoot your missile, and then start aggressively defending against theirs. Obviously, you can't really do that in close range situations, you're just gonna die, but for those 40 or even 30-kilometer fights, you don't have to immediately start defending the second they shoot their missile off at you. You can continue to push in to increase the probability of your missile hitting them and get a little bit closer. Now obviously at some point you have to make the decision to defend, and you're going to have to defend much harder and much more aggressively the closer you are, sure. But it's really going to come down to who knows the combat style better, who makes the smarter choices as far as defending and recommitting and all that kind of thing. There are some extremes that this doesn't really apply to. For example, if somebody shoots an AMRAM at you from pretty much max range and all you have is R77s, you probably don't want to continue just pushing in, because more than likely they're going to have a second AMRAM off at you at very dangerous range by the time you even get your R77 out. And the AMRAM is much more difficult to bleed the energy of than the R77. And so, yeah, there are some extremes where that doesn't apply, where you can just keep on pushing in, but the PL-12 is close enough to pretty much everything to where I feel rather comfortable continuing to fly right at the enemy until I get them into sort of a more dangerous launch envelope. As far as flight performance goes, I do think that this plane has one of the better flight models at top tier. It's certainly nicer than something Russian like MiG-29 or Su-27. Not quite Gripen level, but I would wager, granted I haven't done any testing really on this, I would wager that the J-10 is going to beat pretty much everything, including the F-15C, probably the F-16C, any of the F-14s, all of the Russian mentioned planes, and maybe even the Mirage 2000. The AOA capabilities are extremely nice, and it has some pretty good thrust to weight to go with it, so I think that this plane lends itself into a much better 1 versus 1 plane than something like the JF-17 that China also got with this new update. Not that the JF-17 is particularly a slouch, I just think that that lack of engine power on it could probably be exploited by most, if not all, of the planes at top tier. I think that the J-10A is one of the better additions we've had to the game in quite a while. I think it fits the game perfectly. It's not really overpowered, but it's certainly worth picking up and researching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see ya.